Hello and welcome back to Twinhammer, everybody. We are super excited to be going through our January 2026 Balance Update Guide. We're going to explain everything with context, and we can't wait to get into it. So this guide will summarize all the changes in an easy to understand way. We will show you what the old rules were so you understand the context of the changes much better. We find in Kill Team, they often just show the new text and then it's very hard to find what it was before, so you kind of lose the context of the change. We're going to show you all that context. Now, here are all the list of changes in a nice, neatly presented, categorized way, so it doesn't feel like a huge number of changes and it's all scattered around. So number one, we're going to be looking at the changes to Tomb World. We're going to be looking at the changes to the way that the breach action works, as well as a new equipment there that helps with breaching. We're going to look at changes to Tac Ops, namely 2 from the Recon archetype, Flank, and Retrieval. We're going to be looking at a couple of early changes and clarifications to Shadow Hunt rules as they came out for Murderwing and Celestial Insidiants. And we're going to be looking at what people are probably going to be most excited to see are the nerfs to rein in the top teams, namely Canoptek and Wolf Scouts, as well as we saw some changes to Mandrakes and Deathwatch. We're going to be looking at a lot of very interesting and very exciting buffs to a lot of the lesser played teams. And we're going to be looking at just a little conclusion of the meta balance, how it feels after all of these changes in a bigger context. Okay, so getting into Killzone Tomb World changes. Killzone Tomb World changes have all revolved around breach points. Breach points are holes in the walls of Tomb World that you can find multiple of in each layout where you can actually break a hole in the wall. They're designated places that are sometimes hard to see. We have a Killzone guide on Tomb World if you want tips on how to find them. These breach points can be broken with an action called Breach, which is a 2 AP action, which is a mission action. And so it's easier for some teams to make this breach action if they have any operatives that have the breach marker, Grenadier, Mine, or Piercing 2 weapons in their lineup. So this had created a little bit of a disparity between the teams that had these things and the teams that didn't. And so one really big important change that's happened is that we now see a new universal equipment called the Breaching Charge added. So if you're a team that didn't have any of those easy ways to open these breach points, you can now take an equipment. So once per game, you can do it for 1 AP less. But we've now had a big clarification to the rule breach where if you breach for anything less than 2 AP, so even using this new breaching charge, or you have an operative that can reduce mission actions or an equipment such as the Servo Thrall from Deathwatch, if you do it for 1 AP during your action or counteraction, you cannot charge and shoot in the same counteraction or activation. So now this doesn't say that you can't fight. So when I looked at this a little bit more in depth, I realized what situations might this be useful for. So the charge could be useful for just opening a breach point, getting access to a room early, or you can use it for a sneaky reposition to a breach point, breach for 1 AP using the breaching charge, and then you can hatchway fight after that. Or if you find yourself at the breach point already, you breach for 1 AP, and then if you have a 3 APL model that can double fight, you can do 2 hatchway fights. Because the stipulation says can't charge or shoot, that doesn't say anything about fighting. So these are ways that you can use the breaching charge effectively as this new piece of universal equipment, which is super cool that we've got a new piece of equipment for a kill zone. This is almost like the equivalent of ladders for Volkis. Now we have breaching charges for Tomb World. All right, let's get into some Tac Op changes. So, namely, we're looking at the Recon archetype. Flank was a Tac Op that some teams were finding quite easy to score 5 or 6 points from. Namely, 5 points is the key differential. So now they've changed this. So your enemy is going to try to control both halves of your side of the board by having more operatives in that half than you do in the equivalent of their side. So some teams like Felgor and Mandrakes can just kind of swamp your side of the board and kind of outnumber you on your side. And so what it was before is in Turning Point 2, at the end of it, you would get 2 points for controlling both sides of the board, so 1 point each. Then in turns 3 and 4, you would only need to control one of them to score 2 points each. Okay, so now they've changed it so that it's only in the 4th turning point you need to control only one of these. In turning points 2 and 3, you actually need to control both sides for both of those turns to get 2. If you only control one, you'll get only 1 VP. So the important thing is this makes it go from getting 5 VP on the regular is now going to be more like 4 VP. And this is actually important because a lot of these teams are taking Tac Op as their primary choice, and this was leading to them getting 3 on the primary because they hit 5 on the Tac Op. Now they're only going to hit likely 4 VP from flank, and then that's going to lead to only 2 VP from their primary choice, which is leading to an overall -2 VP shift. And this, in the context of this edition, where games can be very tight, this can be the difference between a win and a loss. 2 VP can be a big swing here. So this hasn't completely nerfed the Tac Op. It's just put it in a nice balanced spot where it's more in line with most of the other Tac Ops that you're likely to kind of get around 4 for your Tac Ops. Retrieval has seen also a change. Now they have stipulated that you cannot retrieve if you're already carrying a marker. So teams that had powerful operatives that had ways of kind of retrieving easily, example, the Canoptek Geomancer, they would just retrieve multiple markers with the same operative and just be carrying them around. Now you can't do it, so you're going to have to either retrieve with that operative, like the Geomancer, and then drop the marker with the drop marker action so one of your other operatives can come pick it up, or you're going to have to just try to retrieve with different operatives instead of the same one. Okay, so just makes it a little bit harder for these like big power pieces to just retrieve multiple times. All right, let's get into some Shadow Hunt changes. The Murderwing and the Celestial Insidiants are 2 new teams. Murderwing have gotten a clarification upon release here. They have a firefight ploy called Murderous Descent, and this involves them interrupting their opponent when the enemy operative ends a charge, dash, or fallback or reposition action. It's been basically stipulated that on Volkis, you can do this if they end 3 inches horizontally and more than 2 inches lower. So you kind of have to be on a vantage for this to trigger. And then in close quarters, such as Tomb World, you have to be within 2 inches. So if they end within 2 inches in Tomb World, you can do this charge action. So you interrupt them and you perform a free charge action, which can be quite good. So it's a little surprise charge that the Murderwing can do. Now it's going to be a little bit harder to get off. Before it was just 3 inches horizontally on Volkis. Now it's 3 inches horizontally and 2 inches lower vertically. So it feels more like Murderous Descent. Okay, they have to descending from lofty purchases. So they've clarified it's like, okay, we actually meant this to work as a descent, not just as a free charge on Volkis. All right, now we're going to take a look at the Celestial Insidiants update. So this revolves around the Denuncia. Denuncia operative is a very important operative for the team because she could basically hand out a minor buff called Inspiring and trade it in for a bigger buff called a Benediction to put on another operative. So she takes Inspiring from one operative, puts a Benediction on another. And so before we have 4 Benedictions, and Exigence has a free charger dash, but it must end closer to the incapacitated Inspiring operative. So when I was doing the guide, I already had a question. Does this get around? Do you not have to move closer to the incapacitated operative when you hand this out from the Denuncia? Now they just said, actually, we're not going to have Exigence being able to be handed out. You can only get Exigence from your operative getting incapacitated and then triggering in that way. The Denuncia cannot hand out Exigence. So she can only hand out Ardor, Wrath, or Restoration from her Speak of Her Deeds support ability. And we can see it's a support ability in this cool picture here. They've put the comms device so you can extend that range. So yeah, very important support piece for the Insidiants. I'm going to be releasing a huge guide very, very soon on the Insidiants, so stay tuned for that. All right, so let's take a look at the big talking point, the nerfs for the big factions. So we're going to start with Canoptek Circle. Canoptek Circle got a number of changes, reining them in even more. So their nerfs revolve around reducing their accurate rule, reducing the Canoptek control action. So accurate gets reduced to 1 instead of accurate 2, making reanimate rule cost -1 APL each, and changing the warrior's profile to be less damaging. We're going to get into each of them in specific now. So they go from accurate 2 to accurate 1 when they are on the obelisk node matrix. And this is important because it reduces their survivability in combat. A lot of their operatives hit on 4s in combat. This was really powerful because if you went to charge them, they were basically starting with 2 dice retained already and then rolling another 2 on 4s. So they'd get 3 dice. Now they only retain 1, which means they have to roll 3 dice on 4s, which is a lot less likely to happen. Even with rerolls on 4s can still end up in misses. So this does really help. It does reduce their overall lethality as well. A lot of their ranged weapons hit on 4s. So now, again, more rolling on 4s means less chance of them actually killing you. And so this is a big swing in their overall lethality and reliability. So this is another huge change here. They have 3 expendable warriors that can keep coming back. And the main issue with these warriors was that they were expendable, so they don't count for kill op when you kill them, but they were actually quite powerful in their stats. So it would feel like they could kill you and then get kill op, but if you killed them, it wouldn't matter. So it was a little bit of a feel bad. Now they've been reduced in damage. Their ranged weapons got reduced. So their piercing weapon got reduced from 3-4 to 2-3. The Gall Scalpel, the Tesla Caster, their 5 attack blast weapon got reduced to 4 attacks, which is really good because this blast 2 on 5 dice, you could just spike and it was very powerful. So now reining that in has been really helpful. And their Claws and Tails in combat has gone down to 3 attack dice. So in combat, for example, they're going to be accurate 1 instead of accurate 2. And now they only have 3 attacks instead of 4. So they're much less lethal in combat, even though they're still 3-4. There's just going to be a lot more times you charge them. You can kind of parry them out and kill them without taking damage, which is going to make them feel a lot less oppressive. And they had a rule called aggressive defense when you would incapacitate them within 2 inches of them, they roll a D3. They could previously inflict up to 3 damage, which is quite a bit. Now they've just reduced it to you're limited to 1. So if they roll a D3 on any result of a 2+ on the dice, they're going to inflict 1 damage, not D3 damage, which is really huge because that overall chip damage is a lot less. Another really big one for reducing their overall effectiveness is Canoptek control cannot be done on counteract from the Geomancer now. He was able to do this, giving a free 1 AP action unlimited to any other operative, and she would be able to do it twice per turning point because once in the activation and then once again on counteract. Now you cannot do it while counteracting, so you can only do Canoptek control once per turn now. And then they've also made it so that you can't Canoptek control one of their units that has been loaded up with the teleport ability more than 2 inches. So before they could just teleport, they could use the teleport to basically, because it was set up and removed again, it kind of bypassed the 2 inches. So they could Canoptek control and teleport like 7 inches, which could be really these surprise plays. Now it's limited to just 2 inches, even with Molecular Breach, their teleport ability. So big changes there. The Reanimator, their medic ability now just comes in line with the other medic abilities of the game, where you subtract 1 from both of the operatives, the Reanimator that saved them and then the one being saved. So just a little less APL efficiency for the team now if you do trigger this ability, which is just a nice thing. It was a little bit too powerful just being free like that. Okay, getting into the Wolf Scout changes. All right, so we've seen a few changes to the Wolf Scouts. Some of their most powerful abilities have been changed. The Wolf Scouts were extremely powerful in combat because they had these 2 strategy ploys that were basically hyper juicing their combat. So before they could fight you, and then when they finished fighting, if you weren't incapacitated, they would deal D3 + 1 damage on you extra. So that was very powerful. So now what they've done is they've changed Savage Fighters to just retaliating. So they only get this if you fight them and you don't kill them. So that's much less overall damage to the Wolf Scouts in combat. And then they had this really oppressive ability or called Storm's Bite, where if you were fighting against them, if they were retaliating, you would be reduced in your attack damage. Now they only get Storm's Bite when they are fighting, when they are the aggressor. That's when your attacks get reduced in the storm. If you charge them in the storm, your attack stat is fine. So we have this difference between fighting and retaliating in Kill Team, and so now these have both been limited to one, not both, like they were before. I think this feels better thematically, and it's just a lot better in balance. Okay, now we're going to get into the Wolf Scout Pack Leader rules. He has this very powerful rule called Grizzled Veteran. So the first time he would be incapacitated, he's not, and he has 1 wound remaining and cannot be incapacitated for the remainder of the action. So before, if you went in combat to charge and kill him, he could basically survive on 1 wound, the fighting sequence ends, and then he could deal D3+1 damage on you, and then he could use another firefight ploy called Counterattack. When you finish your fight action, he now fights you for free. So you'd go to kill him, maybe you'd exchange damage each of you, and maybe you have 7 health remaining. He could basically, on 1 wound, trigger both of these abilities and just kill you instead of you killing him. So it was very, very powerful, very oppressive, and it just feels bad that this guy felt like just kind of this hyped up guy that could just kill you very easily. Now it's brought in line. So if he gets saved, he doesn't have the energy to Savage Fighter you. He doesn't have the energy to counterattack you. He's just alive on 1 wound. He's just sitting there. He can't do this counterattack stuff. All right, so now we're going to get into the Fenrisian Wolf. We've had a bit of clarifying in the commentary. So you have to take into account the back of the base rotating. So if your operative moved 8 and the front of its base has done so, but the back of the base is rotated 90 degrees in the process, this will have caused the back of the base to move more than 8 inches, which is more than the permitted distance. So you've got to be counting the base. You can turn and pivot within your 8 inches, but if any part of your base has now gone more than 8 inches, it's illegal and you have to kind of remeasure it. Okay, and now importantly, the wolf can go on guard. Before they kind of missed this out, so you couldn't really go on guard. Now it can go on guard and it can obviously fight if it's on guard, which is good because it should have been able to. Okay, so that's a really good quality of life improvement for the wolf. All right, let's get into the Mandrakes changes. Mandrakes were dominating at Worlds, so they were a sleeper pick, and now it's been found that some of their abilities needed a little bit reining in. So namely, they have a ploy called Nowhere to Hide, where they can basically phase through walls because they're shadow demons. And so they could basically charge, they were able to charge 9 inches because they got the extra 2 inches from your charge move, and they have base 7. So they'd be able to phase through and get these surprise charges off. They can still do it, but they don't get the extra 2 inches. So they can only charge 7 inches instead. So nice quality of life improvement there. They still have they can still do these huge charges with their free dash plus charge, but they just can't do this. So it's a little bit easier to measure out their threat ranges through walls. All right, so they've had a couple of reining in of their interruption abilities. They have very powerful interruption abilities from the Night Fiend, who's the leader, and the Dirge Maw, who's kind of their debuff piece. And so basically, when you go to activate your model and you're within 6 inches of the leader, the Night Fiend, they could roll a d6, and if it's higher than your APL stat, you can't activate it when you want to there. So you have to try to activate someone else. And now they've nerfed it so that you can't keep doing this if you've already been interrupted with the Harrowing Whispers rule. So if you have been interrupted once by this rule, you can no longer be interrupted again. Before, if you tried to go and activate and you were interrupted, let's say you had to activate another one, when you came back to activate that same operative, it could be delayed again. So it could just lock down an entire activation for an entire turn and then just keep you frozen. Now, it can only happen once. Now, Another interruptibility is the Haunting Focus from the Dirge Maw. And the Dirge Maw has the ability to also interrupt, but it's more specific. The Dirge Maw can pick one operative, and when it goes to activate, the Dirge Maw gets to activate instead. So now these combine because the interrupt from the leader cannot work if the Dirge Maw has interrupted that operative already. So if the Dirge Maw has already interrupted that operative, it can't be that operative that's been interrupted, and let's say it survived the Dirge Maw, it can't then be interrupted by Harrowing Whispers. So you can't really stack these like stalling debuffs on someone, which just makes it better. It was quite oppressive if you could just be perma-stalled and there was nothing you could do about it. Now they've reined it in to be a lot more restrictive. Okay, so the Dirge Maw has another ability called Periodic Projection. And this is a debuff that they could just choose on an enemy if they're within shadow or a valid target. They worsen the weapons by 1 and subtract 2 from its move stat, almost as if you're just making them injured, but it's not injury and it's not cumulative with injury. Before, it would also restrict you from getting any additional APL buffs, any positive APL buff changes, let's say from a comms. Now they've removed that, so it can't prevent you from getting a +1 APL, which can be quite nice. So then, because they could do this on an operative that you had already loaded up and just cancel out your buff and just prevent you from getting a key operative loaded up. So now that's not possible. All right. And lastly, they've had a faction equipment called the Chain Snare. And this has kind of been a big rule overall throughout the changes here. Any team with an equipment that's equal to this, which there are 2 others, Nemesis Claw and Exaction, it's been limited to once per turn. So if you're in if you're in control range with an enemy and they're trying to leave it with a fallback, if you roll a 4 or higher, you can prevent them from leaving. And usually it's if you have a higher wound stat, you can roll 2d6, so any 4 on that. This can only trigger once per turning point, so that's really good there. It was most oppressive with Nemclaw, who can chain charges and just keep you from leaving their control range, which could be very oppressive. So Mandrakes, this hit on Mandrakes is mainly because of Nemesis Claw. Okay, so now the Death Watch changes. They've got a number of changes here that have reined in some of their more oppressive abilities and is going to make them a little bit fairer to play against. One of them being their Veteran Astartes rule. They've now included the Melt-A-Bomb also has to take an additional AP if you're shooting a second weapon from the Breacher. So that's good there because it is kind of a specialty weapon and it wasn't included before. Now, also, this is a pretty big one. They can't fight and shoot in their 2 separate 1 AP counteractions. So if they were in control range with an operative and it came to their counteraction, they could fight, maybe kill that operative and then shoot another operative. So now they can't perform a fight and shoot action in the same counteraction. So they could only, let's say, fight and then move, or fight and then do a mission action, or vice versa, shoot and then do something else. So this just limits them to kind of like -1 kill per turn in terms of their potential. So just limits their like multi-kill potential overall. All right, so now we're going to go to their special ammunition changes. They've had Rending removed and Piercing 1 changed to Piercing Crits 1, which means you need to retain a crit to get Piercing 1. It removes these combos of lethal 5 plus Rending, like the Plasma could supercharge and get multiple crits. So just makes them a little bit less explosive on their weapons, but they still do have Blast 1, which I think is their most powerful thing they can add on. Just a Blast 1 Plasma can really take you by surprise. I've been there. So yeah, they still have a lot of powerful rules. They just don't have like ways of getting multiple crits now, and they don't have quite reliable piercing as they did. So this is a big one. They used to be able to be on the midline, be a little bit in their territory and get a reroll on their defense dice. Now they have to be wholly within their own territory to get that. And another massive one, this is the biggest change that they've had, is their hugely important ploy, the Shield That Slays, when they're in your half of the board. So when they're being aggressive in your half, they now have to be wholly within your half. They can't be partially in theirs and partially in yours. They have to be wholly within yours. So similar change. But now the huge thing is they don't reduce critical damage of 4 to be 1 less. So now they're fully susceptible to crits, which is really big because it's a way that now if you have ways of getting increased crits like lethal 5 or rending or severe, you can have a way of breaking through the huge damage reduction from the Shield That Slays. This is really, really important for a lot of teams because it was often they could just run at you and their wound count would feel like 20 effectively because the shield that slays was just reducing all your damage. So now crits can bypass it. This is a huge quality of life improvement, and the Deathwatch players are going to have to be a little bit more cognizant. They're not just going to be able to run at their opponents with abandon. Okay, so now let's get into exciting buffs for a number of teams, and we are going to start with the Farstalker Kinband. And we have had a really fun deep dive with Victor from Sweden on this. He loves them, so I'm sure he's excited about this. And this has just made this team a lot more relevant. One of the weaknesses of Farstalkers throughout the entire edition and their existence has been their lack of killing power. So they had 3-4 damage across the board, and as the games develop, 3-4 doesn't really punch through as maybe in the inception of the game it did. So there's a lot of teams with 8 wounds and higher, and 3-4 was a little bit hard to consistently break through. Now they've got all of their blades, which were 3-4, have been changed to 3-5. So they've got an increase on their crit damage pretty much team wide. And this is going to make the 8 wound breakpoint much easier to hit, and the 9 wound and 10 wound much easier to hit as well. So Farstalker Kinband have been buffed multiple times, and now finally I think their damage potential is going to give them that really cool melee damage horde feel. So they're going to be able to hit as hard as they take, which is going to be very cool. With thematically, they're supposed to be this feral melee contingent of the Tau Empire, and now that they're going to feel lethal like that is going to be really, really cool. So here we can see the Kroot Stalker. His blades have been gone up from 3-4 to 3-5. So now he's coming in with balance and rending. If he triggers a crit, he's going to have 2 crits that are going to hit for 5 each. And the cool thing with him is that if he does his stealth attack, he can resolve another successes before your opponent can even do anything. So he could go in, if he gets a crit, he gets now 2 crits, and he could just hit for 10 immediately. So now he can punch into some higher wound operatives. 9 wounds and 10 wounds are now within the Stalker's range to insta-kill without taking any damage back, which is really, really cool. And I wanted to bring everyone's attention to a boost that they had previously. Is they have their Cutthroats add 1 to the attack stat of all of their melee weapons. So up to a maximum of 5. So the Stalker, if you have Cutthroats up, now he's coming in with 5 attacks with balance. So the chance of you getting a crit is going to be really, really big. And this is team wide. So if they have 3 attacks, they're now up to 4 attacks in combat. And if they have 4, they're now up to 5. And now everyone's 3-5. So team wide, in the overall maths, this team has just gone up a lot in lethality. They're a horde team with 12 operatives. They hit on 3s also in combat, not 4s. Most horde teams hit on 4s in combat. And they've got 3-5 with a lot of lethal 5 ops and ploys to fight first as well. So Kroot, very exciting place. They're going to be like a melee horde with a bit of shooting kind of feel now. It's going to be very, very cool. Another huge change to Kroot is the Pistolier. His pistols have now gone up to 3-5. So this is one of the few cases in the team where a ranged weapon has gone up in damage. And he has Ceaseless Lethal 5. And his blade with Cutthroats go up to 4 attacks as well. He has a 3-5 blade as well. He has Quick Draw. If you go to shoot him, he could shoot you first. Now he's going to be punching through a lot of enemies with that Ceaseless Lethal 5 pistols. And he has Salvo, where he can now hit 2 different enemies with 3-5. So again, hitting that 8 wound breakpoint way more easily now, which is massive in terms of this operative's damage potential. So Pistolier's really loving it. He's going to go out training on his Quick Draw. And now really, really good quality of life improvement to the Hounds. They had an interrupt ability where they could protect, basically get a free charge action. When you try to kill one of their other operatives, they could basically jump in the way and protect like a guard dog. But the weird thing was you had to be on engage to get that, which would just leave your Hound open to be shot. So you'd have to set this up in probably a very convoluted way. Now you could just have the Hound on conceal, and when you trigger the bad tempered rule, you could just switch its order to engage to get the charge off. So huge quality of life improvement. The Hounds are actually going to be proper guard dogs now, and they're going to be able to keep your key pieces alive from being killed in combat, which is a really, really nice quality of life improvement. All right, Another one from the Gallowdark box, the first wave of the Into the Dark series. So Breachers were paired against Farstalkers, and both of them have seen huge lethality upgrades. So we have the Breachers. They've got 2 key upgrades. The first one is their ploy Close Assault. It used to be that within 3 inches, your operative weapons would just have the punishing rule. Now, if you're fighting or shooting an enemy operative within 3 inches of it, not retaliating, but fighting or shooting, you add +1 damage to all stats of its Navis shotguns. And then if you roll 2 or more fails, you could discard one of them to retain as a normal success instead. So the first one applies to the shotguns, which is a very common weapon throughout the team. The armsmen have it. You could take any number of them. They GA2. Now they can go up to 4/4 damage. Again, hitting that key 8 wound breakpoint. The Endurant, he has basically the same thing, but with Relentless on his shotgun. Now can hit a lot harder himself. And then key thing is if you're going in and you're fighting with your hatchets, if you roll 2 or more fails, which you're kind of likely to do on 4s, you can retain one as another success instead. So all of the melee in fighting on the team also got upped in reliability. So now instead of punishing where you'd have to get a crit to turn a miss into a hit, now you basically have it built in. So the entirety of their fighting damage has gone up in reliability. So huge amount of reliability for shooting within 3 inches and fighting, and then big increase the shotgun. So now their shotguns can hit as hard as the Exaction shotguns. So this is going to be a huge Now, into the next series of boxes from the Gallowdark, we have the Heirotek Circle. The Heirotek Circle returns from obscurity, a team infamous for kind of getting nerfed and then coming back, being too strong and then being too weak and then being too strong and then being too weak. And so now it looks like they're in a good spot because the previous change they had put them down to a 5 kill grade team, and they have 8 operatives. So every time you would incapacitate one of their operatives, your kill grade would go up. And this could just be any single time you'd just get another kill grade as soon as you kill one of them. So the community was finding that you could just reach 5 VP on your kill op extremely quickly against Heirotek, and it would have a lot higher chance of just winning the game on points because your kill op would just be so good. You could choose that as your primary and you'd get so many points. Now they have an interesting interaction with the kill op. They have a very unique interaction with the kill op because they've remained a kill grade 5 team. But when you incapacitate one of their operatives, you go up in kill op just automatically. You don't have to consult the chart. You just automatically go 1 higher in kill op. However, if they reanimate at any point, you go down in your kill op points. So it's kind of like a very literal thing of like, you kill, you go up, they reanimate, you go down. And so there's this little mini game now where they're going to be trying to get those reanimates off to try to reduce your kill op. So I think it's going to be this really interesting sweet spot where you won't just max kill op so easily, but they're not going to feel like they just ignore the kill op like they had when they were dominating, where it was very hard to get any kill op points against them at all. So it's a very interesting, unique spot for them now. Then they've got a change to their Chronomancer interstitial command. This is very similar to the Canoptek one, where they just limit the teleport abilities. They can't be removed and set up more than 2 inches during your interstitial command action. So limited to the teleport to 2 inches as well there. All right, let's get into Kasrkin changes. So Kasrkin have been my main team since Worlds. On the way back from Worlds, the last day just before the flight, I was looking at Hearthkyn Salvagers and I saw that their comms guy could now do what the Kasrkin comms guy can do. So I said, let me take a look at the Kasrkin changes. And since then, I've been absolutely loving this team. I had a Kasrkin team ready to go, and their recent changes have made them just a joy to play. And so they've got even more changes now. And these additional changes mean that this team has been changed 16 times, I believe, since the start of the edition. And at the start of the edition, they had many changes from the previous edition. So a lot of people's memories are still from the previous edition of Kill Team of this team because they haven't been seen too much in this edition. I'm here to tell you this team is not just a one-dimensional shooting elite hunting team. It is an extremely enjoyable toolbox team that has access to a number of different tools that you can apply at the right time. So thematically, they feel amazing. They feel like elite warriors who have been trained to be good in every condition. No matter where they are, they can tech into one of their trainings that has given them a little bit of a boost. So elite points from the previous edition have been replaced with skill at arms, and they went from hitting on 4s to hitting on 3s team-wide. So anyone who still has those memories of hitting on 4s with elite points, just erase that from your memory. They have skill at arms, and they have 4 really cool skill at arms. One which helps with shooting, gives them severe. The other one gives them the movement of elves, so their reposition goes up to 7 instead of 6. They have skill at arms for Cadia. It used to be a random ploy that you could do once. Now the entire team adds 1 to its attack stat of its melee weapons to a maximum of 4. And when you're fighting, the first time you strike, you can inflict 1 additional damage, meaning a power weapon from the sergeant can just clean a 7 wound operative straight. Ice in your veins, really cool. You get damage reduction when you're fighting, retaliating, or getting shot at. The first time an attack dice inflicts normal damage of 3 or more, it inflicts 1 less. So you can reduce damage of 3 from normals. The first time you receive a damage dice, it's 1 less. So they're even tanky now. They can kind of get up to 9 wounds overall. And so the really big change with this current data slate is that they gave an extra rule to the sergeant where it's called veteran leadership. Whenever this operative is in the kill zone, when you choose your skill at arms, you can select an additional skill at arms. So previously, you'd have to choose one of these 4 for the turn in your strategic phase to get. So you'd have to kind of calculate which one is more impactful for me this turn. Now you can choose 2, which is massive. So you can get these beautiful combos of, okay, I want severe from shooting, but I also want asymmetric threat from, a 10-inch move dash shoot. I can get strike fast, light them up. Or if your opponent's like a melee team and they want to charge you, you're like, okay, cool. You have 4/4 in melee. I'm going to trigger Forcadia and in Ice in your veins for this turn. Now it's going to take 3 normal attacks to kill me in combat, and I'm going to have 4 attacks in combat, making it way more likely for me to survive. So all of a sudden you go to this tanky, decent in combat team, and you can apply these rules when you want. The cool thing is the leader also has another ability for 0 AP. He can hand out an additional skill at arms. So he can pick any one operative to have for the turn, another skill at arms. So your sergeant's a very good 2A model. He has 3 EPL. So you can choose 3 of these faction rules to be applied to him. Really good for a good charge fight shoot. You can give him light him up for Cadia, Ice in your veins, and then all of a sudden you're getting some really cool things. So really, really fun team. This is the flavor of Kasrkin in this edition. Very cool toolbox team. Now, they've also got a really good quality of life improvement. They've got an additional faction rule added to them. So each time a friendly Kasrkin operative that doesn't perform an action in which it moves during its activation can perform 2 shoot actions, excluding guard during that activation, but bolt pistol, hotshot las gun, or hotshot las pistol must be selected for both of those actions. So Kasrkin can take a number of specialist gunners, but the rest of the operatives on the team have a hotshot las gun, which is this infinite range 4 attacks hitting on 3s, 3/4. The sergeant could either also be having a bolt pistol and power weapon or a hotshot las pistol and power weapon. There's no reason to take the bolt pistol. I think they just included it for 40K because in Kill Team, you're always taking the las pistol because it actually has synergy with your other rules. So you can have the power weapon and las pistol. And this gives the ability to have 2 shoot actions. So you could spend both of your APL to shoot twice as long as you don't move. And the cool thing is with Kasrkin, you have a strategic ploy where you can move any number of operatives that are close to each other with a free dash. So you can still get a free dash and 2 shoot actions off if you set it up properly, which is going to give a lot of extra firepower to this team. This rapid fire rule is going to help the most against teams like Goremongers, where you kind of need to 2-tap them. It's going to help just pushing that little bit extra damage through to ensure that you get kills, which is going to really help with the effectiveness of this faction. And so now, as we see those changes to the rapid fire and the hotshot las guns, we can see 3 other things that actually impact that change as well. Because elimination pattern and neutralize target, 2 ploys have been changed as well. Elimination pattern can give your hotshot weapons, any hotshot weapon gets the piercing crits 1 weapon rule, or piercing 1 if it's the hotshot volley gun. And this can be paired with the severe from Light 'em Up, your skillet arms. So you're triggering basically piercing 1. So every lasgun now has piercing 1. And before it was, if the operative was in cover, you basically could not trigger elimination pattern. Now they've changed it to cannot retain any cover saves. And the key distinction is that the rule saturate is the defender cannot retain any cover save. So even if they're in cover, if you have saturate, you can trigger elimination pattern. And the cool thing is, we look at often not used equipment called the long range scope. If you're shooting an operative more than 6 inches from your operative, you get saturate on your hotshot weapon. So now you can get the long range scope in just to ensure that you're getting the piercing 1. So all of a sudden, all of your lasguns have saturate and piercing 1 on them, and you could shoot twice. So that is really, really nice. The neutralized target is basically on-demand relentless. Before, it used to be if they're in cover, you can't trigger this or being scanned. Now, again, long-range scope really helps to get that neutralized target from that relentless if you need it from your hotshot weapons. And you could still do it from any other weapon as long as they don't retain any cover saves. So you could break their cover within 2, or you could scan them from the recon trooper as well. So very excited for this. They're a really fun team, as are a lot of these teams in the Gallowdark series. Another one now that's a segue into Exaction, which is another one of my favorites. I took them to Worlds. I was the only Exaction player at Worlds. They got a really nice buffs before Worlds, and now they've got even more buffs. So this is a team that's very hard to play because you have to stack a lot of tokens and a lot of synergies, but they've got some nice quality of life improvements. The Leashmaster Dog is an amazing combo. They have this combo where they can activate together, and when you select them both for your kill team, as you start the game, you select a attack pattern for the dog to have. So you can give the dog buffs as long as you have the Leashmaster in your lineup. You can give the dog a buff. Before it was 1 buff. Now they've given 2 buffs to the dog that you can have. And then the Leashmaster at any point during his activation can change one of these attack patterns into another one. So the key thing is now you can start the battle with +2 the move stat of the dog, so it goes up to 8-inch move, and you can start it with defensive, so now +1 to its save, so now it's 8-inch move, 3-up save. So the key thing you do with this combo is you charge the dog in using Swift, so you get this huge 10-inch charge. Then you change Swift to aggressive to get relentless in combat, so now it's got relentless, lethal 5, 3, 5, 4, 4. So the big thing here is that now you do the same change, but you can basically have the defensive save up at all times now. So you still change in combat Swift to aggressive, but you have 3-up save at all times. So the dog got tankier in essence. You just went from a 4-up save to a 3-up save on the dog. Even if the Leashmaster dies, it will still have it. Yeah. All right. The Grenade Launcher operative had a pretty good profile. He had 4 attacks, 4-ups, 4-6 piercing 1. Now they've reduced the crit damage by 1 to 4-5, but they've given an extra attack to 5 dice. So the huge thing with this is a combo you want to get off with Exaction is you want to trigger the lethal 5 punishing. So they have Mark for Justice, which gives a particular operative you're hunting punishing, like your entire team gets punishing against them. Then the Mallocator can hand out lethal 5 and severe against a particular operative. So you keep trying to stack these 2 buffs to really increase your damage against a particular operative. And you have a ploy that gives balanced. So now you have 5 attacks with balanced, lethal 5, and punishing. The chance of you triggering the punishing is huge. So you're probably going to get like 4 attack dice going through now, which is going to really up this gunner's damage output. And also, just going to a 5 attack dice gives the upper limit of damage. If you were to roll all crits, you just get a crazy roll. Now you can do 25 damage with a shooting attack on the team, which is now the upper limit of damage on the team. So really helps them punch into those really tanky operatives like Raveners. This team struggled with Raveners because you need to burst them down quickly before they go back into the tunnel. this helps them get that extra bit of burst. All right, now the Revelatum has had a cool little rework. So before, you used to be able to give Seek Light and Anti-Obscuring against a particular operative, and you would have to have visibility, but you could only give Anti-Obscuring and Seek Light to operatives within 3 inches of your Revelatum. Now it's been reworked to you pick one operative visible to and within 8 inches of the Revelatum, so there's an 8-inch restriction now, but there's no restriction of having people near you to kind of hand it out. So it was a little bit clunky because in order to get Seek Light and Anti-Obscuring, you'd have to bunch up all your operatives right next to the Revelatum to get this, which would just be very, very clunky. So now you could just have the Revelatum, which also has a free reposition before the game starts, which is really, really nice. Now works more like a detective, kind of like already further forward deployed than the rest, is shining a flashlight on someone, being like, you can Seek Light, Anti-Obscure this one person. And then everyone's like, okay, I see the flashlight on it, which is much more thematic, and it's just a cleaner way of it working. So this is a huge win for this rework because it feels better to use and it's better thematic. Again, now manacles, this is the same rules as chain snares, that Nemesis Claw, their only change was exactly the same as this. I didn't include Nemesis Claw because they've had this exact same change. It's the exact same equipment. It just has a different name, manacles, chain snares. And so you can only lock someone in combat prevent them from falling back once per turn. And again, this was really nice for Exaction. You'd often couldn't trigger it. I often wasn't taking this because it's hard to trigger anyways. Nemesis Claw, because they usually have a higher wound stat than the person they're trying to trap, would find that this went off way more consistently, so it was good for them. Exaction, this was already hard, and now you can't get that upper limit of doing it more than once. So I think Nemesis Claw really made Exaction get this nerf when it was mainly Nemesis Claw who were the offenders. Okay, Hand of the Archon Changes, another very cool team that's a little bit faded to obscurity, and they were in the Soul Shackle box with Exaction. So we've seen more Gallowdark teams get some really needed buffs because they're all super cool. We can see that a little quality of life improvement here for the Elixicant is that you can hand out a pain token at the start of in the ready step of each strategy phase. If you've chosen the Adrenalite combat drug for your team, which you usually do, you hand out a pain token, and the pain token is really key to this faction. But there was another key thing where your Arch Sybarite would want to pass in the strategic gambit phase, and before this, Adrenalite thing was a strategic gambit. So now there's a better combo where it's not a strategic gambit, it just happens. So you can safely pass with the Cunning rule and not worry about not handing out that pain token, which is crucial. So little quality of life combo improvement here between the Elixicant and the Arch Sybarite. And these are the invigorations that you can get with the pain tokens. So very cool, like different buffs you could choose to do with, you trade in a pain token to get one of these things, basically. And now the Arch Sybarite has a way of getting a pain token for himself for free when they perform the fight or shoot action. And you can have any number of pain tokens. There's no limit. So he could already have a pain token, just keep getting some more and do a lot of good things. So for example, Ceaseless, he can just guarantee that he gets Ceaseless when he fights or shoots once during each of your activations. So at least once you'll get Ceaseless during his activation, which is really nice. Okay, Chain Snare, I'm not going to go into depth. This is Manacles, and the same thing that I just explained with Exaction. You can only use it once per turning point now. All right, Hearthkyn Salvager, another team that I was looking at heavily after Worlds. They look very, very fun, tanky Brazilian dwarves. They just look really, really cool. And they've got some extra quality of life improvements. So they got, for their strat ploy need keeps, where they can increase the attack stat of melee weapons on a particular marker. They now have gotten, if it already has an attack stat of 4, you get balance. So this is really helpful for some of their melee specialists, like the Dozer here, which is one of the coolest operatives. You can get now Ceaseless that he has built in, can be paired with balance. So he almost has Relentless, and then that's going to really help trigger the Lethal 5, which is going to help trigger the Shock. So, and then he has Brawler, where he can hit with an unresolved success. So the more reliability he has, the more dice that he's retained, the more effective he's going to be. And then Nux Smash, really cool ability as well to do some extra damage. So the Thane will also get some balance. There's a number of operatives, like even the Field Medic, have 4 attacks base, so they'll just get balance, which is nice. Helps this team punch up a little bit extra in combat as well. And that's on fighting and retaliating. Another little rework here. This is kind of like a nerf, because the Cognitar operative used to just have this attack order where you could get a reroll within 3 inches of your marker. Now they've changed reroll a dice to balanced. And so the important distinction here is that balance can't stack with balanced. Balance can stack with reroll a dice. So you could get 2 rerolls that way. But if both of the keywords are balanced, which need keeps is, and attack order is, you can't get both. So that's the key thing here. Still really, really good. You just need keeps can't really stack with this. All right. So this is probably the biggest change, where now they're much better on Volcus, because before they'd have a climbing rig, which would just reduce your climb by 1, which on a 5-inch move wasn't really that impactful. And you probably weren't taking it because it's just ladders were way more effective. But now their climbing rigs, you could treat any vertical distance as 2 inches, and when you're dropping, ignore the vertical distance. So now this you'd take over ladders hugely, because you could even get to the second story of Volcus, second story vantage, for just 2 inches. So really makes this team be able to navigate Volcus in a very cool way, which is thematically good for them, because they're supposed to be able to be these salvagers, like be able to scale buildings, find salvage with their specialized equipment. Now it's going to really feel like that thematically. So they can get some asymmetrical plays too, because they don't count for dropping at all. So really helps them to get on vantage, get off. Before, unless you're going up a ladder, you wouldn't really want to get up there because it costs you so much to get down again. Now, whenever you're dropping, you just ignore the vertical distance. So really helps their 5-inch move be much more effective on Volcus. So Scouts got a little bit in the obscurity as well. Despite the success of Mandrakes in the meta, they came out around the same time and have just kind of faded to obscurity a little bit. And so they've got a number of quality of life improvements here as well. One of their forward scouting rules, called Tactical Maneuver, used to be once per battle, you could give out an extra APL in the strategic phase. But now it's twice per battle. So this is going to really help with their APL efficiency. And the interesting thing is that you can add 1 APL to the Sergeant. There's no stipulation that you can't. So he's one of the few operatives in the game that can go up to 4 APL. And because they've been restricting that on a number of different teams, like the Geomancer used to, now they restricted that. This is kind of a unique selling point for Scouts, is that their leader can be these hugely cool plays. Really exciting there. You can shoot twice, then charge and fight. And he's got that ability because he has the Astartes training. So he's basically a Marine. He can't perform 2 shoot and 2 fight, but he could do one or the others. You can charge, fight, shoot twice, which is very cool. I've seen this big power play in action, and it's quite cool. All right, another big quality of life improvement is that their Astartes training ploy, they have a firefight ploy that basically gives the same to anyone on the team. And now the heavy bolter missile launcher or sniper rifle could all fire twice, but they'd have to spend an additional 1 AP action. So the tactical maneuver to hand out that extra APL, or the scout leader just to hand out an APL for free. It doesn't, it's not like he has to spend an APL of his. The sergeant combined with tactical maneuver can get either of these, any of these heavy bolter missile launcher or sniper rifle to shoot twice if you combine it with the firefight ploy Astartes training. The moment you can set up a nice missile launcher to shoot 2 crack profiles at an operative in one turn, is going to give the scouts that much needed explosiveness from their heavy hitters that they were maybe lacking. So their overall damage output has gone up now, in addition to getting a bit more APL efficiency. They've had a couple of their ploys, a little bit quality of life improvement. It used to be a 6-inch restriction for adaptable training and stealth relocation. Now it is just 4 inches. So much easier to use. You can be outside of 4 much more easily than you can be outside of 6. And they've had one additional change to their ploy called Raw Physiology, which they can ignore the stats to being injured. And now they can also do it to get an extra 1 inch to its move stat. So move stat means you can get an extra 1 inch to your charge or 1 inch to your reposition, which is massive because they have this ploy stealth relocation, which just got easier to use. And you could get a free dash action for D3 operatives in the strategic phase as long as they have a conceal order. But now they can get a 3-inch dash plus a 9-inch charge if they combine that with Raw Physiology, or a 3-inch dash from stealth relocation, 7-inch reposition from Raw Physiology, and then another just normal dash, and then a shoot, which can give a 15-inch threat range. Now scouts have this ability to be surprisingly explosive. So you could think like, oh, all the scouts are back there, but then now they combine these cool abilities and they can have these huge threat ranges, which is very cool. So you could do this with the leader with the 4 APL play. All of a sudden, he's charging 9 inches with a 3-inch dash. He's ignoring injury for his entire activation, and he has a 4 APL activation. So you can just do these massive super plays with the scouts now, which is cool. It gives them that extra faction identity of like, well, you think they might be in training, but they can just explode into life. And now, just the tracker got one little quality of life improvement. You don't have to select one expended enemy operative. It's already not as good as maybe the Exaction Revelatum because you have to spend this 2 separate actions to get Seek Light and Anti-Obscuring, whereas the Revelatum just does it in 1. And then this had an extra thing where you had to choose an expended operative, so you could get Seek Light without having to target an expended operative. It could be any operative, which is just a nice quality of life improvement. All right, the Ratlings also got some changes here. Quality of life improvements. Their fixer, which is their leader, he has a rule called target designation, which is a strategic gambit. You select one enemy operative until the end of the turning point. Whenever a friendly Ratling operative is shooting that enemy operative with a rifle, that weapon has the lethal 5 special rule. So really nice. Before, you used to have to select an operative visible to the fixer, which was kind of hard because the Ratlings are so small that visibility is actually hard for them to get. Like, they're behind a Volcus wall. They can't see over it. So any of these visibility restrictions is already hard enough for the team. So you might not even have been able to get this up. It would have been a very hard setup. You'd have to have it in the back of your mind. It would have been a whole thing. Now, just way easier to use. Just pick any operative. You get lethal 5 against that operative with rifles for the entirety of that turn. Really good. It's going to make this team easier to play. Another 2 big quality of life improvement. They had 2 faction equipments that previously could only be used one at a time. Now you can stack them. Once per turn, you can improve the hit stat of a rifle by 1 for purloined rations. And then once per turn, lucky round, you can also get the severe weapon rule as well. So lucky round can be really nice with the big shot. You just trigger severe for that devastating 4. And then the purloined rations plus the severe to get the devastating 1 on the mobile profile could be really nice to combine both of these, because then you're going to be hitting on 2s with the mobile from purloined rations as well. It's just an example. There's other examples to use these, but just nice to have them. More explosive in an activation. We've seen now these teams, multiple teams get more explosiveness, which is key against teams like Raveners or teams like Deathwatch, where you need to kill them in a window. And so we've seen a lot of these teams get that little bit extra explosiveness to to meet that damage window. All right, Battleclade Changes, a team that is very interesting but hard to use, have seen some changes. And we can see multiple changes here, quite a few changes for the Battleclade. So they've had their main rule, New Spheric Network, just reworked a little bit. And so the key distinction here is, before it was when a servitor operative is activated, you can transfer power. Then you would subtract 1 APL. The big key distinction is now, once during each of Battleclade Servitive Operative's activation, before or after performs an action, you can spend 1 AP to transfer power. So now it's much more flexible. You don't have to do it at the start of your activation. So one example of this giving more flexibility is you can activate an operative, a servitor. You can shoot with that operative. If you kill the operative you're shooting at, you can either then choose to transfer power or do something else, but then you can save one of your big operatives to shoot later, like your big gun servitors. Before, you'd have to transfer the power first, so you'd have to shoot with maybe your bigger gun first, and it might be overkill. Now you can kind of have more flexibility and wait out. So again, there's going to be a lot of flexibility with this, especially because there's another thing that has been changed here, is before they couldn't transfer power and get someone to move. Now they can. So they can actually do a reposition for 2 inches outside of their activation. So now you can have this network of moving 2 inches anywhere with an operative. So you can get that extra 2 inches that you might need to get onto an objective. So they could transfer power to someone, move them 2 inches, and then activate that other operative and have them charge with an extra 2 inches essentially. So it's a hard team to use, but now they actually have movement tricks baked in as well. So you could get some surprise plays. So you can move them 2 inches and then reposition 6 inches later and then shoot. So you could charge essentially now 8 inches. There's a lot you can do with this. So they're going to feel just less static and more like you're kind of moving around. These servitors are going to have these little bursts of movement. Another change is that System Exorcism, they could remove the 1 APL from transferring power, essentially bringing you back up to 2 APL. But now they've kind of got rid of that. But it's not too bad because we have some other changes. Combat servitors have gotten a key thing, the Phosphor Blasters, which in my guide for Battleclade, I advocated that this is actually a good weapon to take. I would take this over the auto proxy. And the reason is because it has no range restriction on this weapon. Now it's gone from just severe to severe in Blast 1. Blast 1 is incredibly powerful. Blast is probably the strongest keyword a gun can have because you can basically duplicate shots if you can get a blast on anyone. It gives you a free extra shot. And now you have lethal 5 because Blast gets lethal 5 on close quarters. So close quarters or in the Volkis strongholds, you also get lethal 5 on this weapon. So much better. Already nice to have that extra range. And I would highly suggest using this instead of the auto proxy because the auto proxy has no gun. Now, the Underseer, which is the manipulator in the background of this team, he used to have this ability called the Spur. And you could choose an operative within 6 inches of this operative or the auto proxy, and it gets a free dash action. Now, they've got rid of that, and they've put it to now you choose operatives within 6 of this operative or the auto proxy. And then you roll a d3. If the result is equal to or less than a number of objective markers those operatives contest, you gain 1 CP. So you're just trying to pick some operatives that are contesting a marker, and you're going to try to get more. And so this is going to give you an extra CP per turn, basically, which is really good because they rely on a lot of their ploys for reliability in their shooting and fighting. So that's going to allow them to have a bigger CP bank. And even though some people, shout out to George, mourning the loss of Spurs, we actually have an overall boost to the team's ability to get these like sneaky movements, as we saw. So it's really not too big of a loss. And you do get still that movement shenanigans. It just doesn't have to come from the Underseer. So now another big one is the electromagnetic capacitors would give your melee weapons shock. And then if you're retaliating, you would get severe. Before, it's only when a ready friendly operative is retaliating, which is a weird stipulation that it had. Now they got rid of that. So even if your operative's expended, which you're going to have like a lot of expended operatives after transferring power, you're still going to get the severe. And the key thing here is severe and shock pair together. So you retain a crit, and then you could use that crit, push through that crit to do also one normal parry at the same time, or parry a crit if they have no normals. So this is now every time you retaliate, essentially. So it does increase the team's survivability in combat, which is really nice. Another big one is they had this faction equipment, the reserve cells. So you roll a d3 at the equipment option step. So you can essentially get 1 to 3 APL extra that you can use for transferring power at a good time at any given time throughout the game, which now got changed to be able to be used when you shoot or fight as well. So before, you could transfer power for 0 AP, but the guy that you were doing it with could not shoot or fight. Now you can transfer power for free and shoot or fight. So the nice thing is you can now opens up a reposition shoot and then transfer power for free, have someone else shoot. So it gives a lot more flexibility to these reserve cells, and it's going to, again, make Battleclade feel a lot smoother to play and a lot less clunky, because this is just going to open up some extra flexibility. It's almost 1 to 3 extra APL you have to work with throughout the battle. All right, let's take a look at the starter set box teams now. So starting with Plague Marines, they got a couple of changes. They've got their Poison Vent faction equipment, got a little bit of a rework. Before, it was if any enemy operative within 3 had a poison token, you could inflict up to D3 damage instead of 1, so a little bit more damage. Now they've reworked it to whenever an enemy operative that doesn't have one of your poison tokens is activated within 3 inches of a Plague Marine operative, roll 1d3. On a 3, that operative gains one of your poison tokens. So now it becomes less of extra damage dealer to more poison tokens being handed out. So just more effective because their poison is a way that they can trigger other abilities and then also just keep chipping you as you activate. Keep chipping you down 1 damage at a time. They've had another way of getting easier poison tokens, their Virulent Poison Firefight ploy. Now, instead of having to roll a 2d6 and get a 7+ to hand out a poison token with Virulent Poison, you just can do it automatically if they're visible to and within 7 inches of you. So they've added the visibility stipulation, but you don't have to roll, which is really nice. You could get it within 3 inches or visible to and within 7, hand out a poison token. Much better. Just, again, easier to use the team now, which is really nice. All right, let's take a look at some Angels of Death changes. And they have 2 changes, one big, one smaller. And the big change that they've had is that they can take both of your cool operatives, the heavy intercessor gunner, your big tanky heavy bolter guy, and then your eliminator sniper, your extremely specialist sniper, perma-silent sniper. You don't have to choose between the 2 of them. If you do want to take both of them, you now have the option to take both. You got the Phobos sniper and the big tanky heavy intercessor in Gravis armor, which is really cool. So he's also got a bolt pistol, which is really nice because it gives him some increased flexibility there in terms of shooting an additional time. So just really nice, little quality of life improvement there as well. All right, so that brings us to our conclusion. So we wanted to go really in depth, and as you can see, hopefully now you have a really good sense of all the changes. A lot of teams got more exciting, easier to use, and a lot of the more oppressive rules from the upper end of the field bads have been reined in. So I think this is looking like huge amount of quality of life improvements. Overall, Tomb World's going to feel much better. If you had any struggles with breaching, is going to feel much better. And I think that this just closes the gaps between all the teams. Obviously, I think some teams, you can never really get perfect balance, but it's going to be impossible to tell the exact balance because there's like 30 different teams. But overall, I think the gaps between the rules have become much more in line. It's very skill-based, and I think all of them feel really fun to try out. There's so many changes now. I think everything's going to feel fun. I think the teams like Wolf Scouts and Canoptek, you're not going to feel that bad playing them anymore because they're going to feel less oppressive. So players that want to play those are going to feel much better. I think Deathwatch players are going to have to find some other ways of playing other than just run and rely on your stats, which is going to make them feel a little bit more skill-based. I think a ton of the teams that were in obscurity have reasons to come out of obscurity and have their time to shine, especially the Gallowdark teams, which are going to be rotated out at the end of this year after Worlds. So really, if you are interested in any of those teams, now's the time to jump on. They all seem very, very fun. And yeah, we have a really fun meta to try out and enjoy. So really, really looking forward to Kill Team coming up now. So that being said, if you do need anything Kill Team, you want to try out some new teams and you want to get some new cards and you need some tokens, custom tokens for a team you want to try out, Crossfire Games has incredible products. We are so happy to be featuring Crossfire Games. You can get everything from custom tokens for your team to just another set of very nice tokens. They're hard to come by. You can get this beautiful card organizer. You can get this amazing scorecard, and you could get it all in one supreme package, the big box that also comes with a dice tray. The way this stacks is ingenious. Nick, who designed this all, is just incredible. And we are so blessed as a community to have these products available. We are going to have a 10% off discount link in the description so you can get yourself some of these incredible products and just enjoy your Kill Team games even more. And we are so excited to be featuring this. If you need anything Kill Team, if you're looking at picking up a team that you've had your eye on and now finally these buffs have given you a reason to pick them up, if you're excited for Shadow Hunt, if you're looking forward to getting these teams when they release individually, if you're looking forward to getting Tomb World now, you can find all of these as well as anything hobby related at Top Shelf Co. in Oakville, or if you're in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, you can find them at Chimera Gaming. We love shouting out these two spots because they are pillars of the Canadian Kill Team community. They're always running amazing events. They're always trying to help out the community in every way they can. And they're incredible and they deserve recognition, and they're just amazing guys that will take care of you amazingly well. So if you need anything Kill Team related, Top Shelf Chimera will have it for you. And thank you so much for watching. We've got more Kill Team content coming up. We've got guides for Shadow Hunt imminent. We're going to be going super in depth like we always do, giving you the most clarity you can possibly get in a thorough way. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully things have become clear now for you. And really appreciate everyone who watches and comments. Leave us a comment. How are you feeling? Are you excited about a team? We're always looking for a positive outlook on things, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day, and stay tuned for the Celestial Insidiants guide, which will be coming out very, very shortly. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you very soon.